I was leaning back in my leather office chair, the morning sunlight spilling over my mahogany desk, when my phone buzzed insistently against the polished wood. My silk blouse clung lightly to my skin, warm from the first rays of the sun sneaking through the blinds. I picked up the phone, expecting a routine email from my assistant, maybe a reminder about the client meeting I had in 30 minutes. Instead, it was her, my sister. Her message was short, clinical, and infuriating. "I'm filing for custody of your trust fund. Call me." For a moment, I laughed. The sound was sharp, brittle, carrying a weight of disbelief that only years of careful restraint could produce. $12 million, the very fund she thought she could manipulate, and she dared send me this message like I was still the scared little sister I used to be. I could feel the pulse in my temples, the subtle tightening of my fingers around my phone, the faint scent of espresso curling from my cup beside me. I glanced out the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city hum below, skyscrapers gleaming, oblivious to this family drama. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, thriving, independent, financially untouchable, and she thought she could threaten me with the past. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Pride, frustration, a touch of amusement, and a sharp sense of justice all collided in that moment. Today, she wouldn't just learn she was wrong. She would learn why I had always been untouchable. I remember the day it all began, as if it were etched into my skin. I was 24, fresh out of college, clutching a faded leather portfolio, like it was a lifeline. My sister, Caroline, had already been there, her smug grin practically radiating entitlement. "You'll never be able to handle what Dad left behind," she sneered, tossing her hair over her shoulder as if it were a crown she'd been born wearing. I felt the sting immediately, a sharp burn behind my eyes. My hands trembled slightly, and I had to grip the portfolio tighter to keep from dropping it. My throat tightened, choking me, as she continued, listing all the ways I supposedly lacked the maturity, judgment, and savvy to manage a trust fund of any magnitude. It wasn't just the money. It was the message. "You are nothing without us." Grandma's words echoed in my mind then. "Molly, strength isn't about fighting them with anger. It's about standing tall even when they try to break you." She had given me a small, delicate silver locket on my 18th birthday, saying it would remind me that my value wasn't dictated by anyone else. I held that locket now, the cold metal pressing against my chest as I looked Caroline squarely in the eye. I could feel the weight of every dismissive comment, every mocking laugh from family dinners where I had been told I was too idealistic or too sensitive for business. The lump in my throat grew, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to cry, to run, to just vanish from their judgmental gaze. But something flickered inside me, a tiny, defiant flame that refused to be snuffed out. "I'll prove you wrong," I whispered under my breath, almost to myself. The decision wasn't just about money. It was about proving that my life, my abilities, and my dreams weren't negotiable. I walked out that day with my portfolio clutched to my chest, heart pounding, palms sweaty, and a determination so fierce it nearly burned my skin. I didn't know exactly how I would do it. I didn't have a plan, just the stubborn certainty that I would never again let anyone define my worth. That locket swung lightly against my shirt as I stepped into the sunlight, carrying both my fear and my first step toward independence. The years that followed were a blur of relentless effort, quiet victories, and the kind of sleepless nights that feel endless until you finally touch success. I moved into a tiny apartment in Boston, far from my family's opulent estate, where I could breathe and build something of my own without scrutiny. Every corner of that small space became a reminder that I was starting fresh. The chipped coffee mug from a thrift store, the faded curtains I'd hung myself, the tiny desk littered with notes and spreadsheets that no one else cared about. I found my first mentor entirely by accident, a seasoned financial advisor named Margaret, whose reputation for tough love preceded her. She didn't coddle me or apologize for my youth. Instead, she challenged every assumption I had about business, money, and myself. "You have fire, Molly," she said one evening, reviewing my initial projections. "Don't let anyone else dictate how brightly it burns." Her words sank in deeper than any criticism I had endured from my sister or family. The early days were brutal. I juggled freelance consulting gigs while learning investment strategies from scratch, poring over market reports late into the night. My hands shook from too much coffee, my eyes ached from reading tiny print on financial statements, and self-doubt was a constant whisper at the back of my mind. But each small victory, landing my first paying client, seeing the first profit margin grow, negotiating a contract successfully, fed that tiny flame that Grandma had nurtured with her silver locket and quiet faith. I learned quickly that secrecy was my shield. No one at family dinners, no one in my old neighborhood had to know the real story. I posted modest updates on social media, crafting a version of myself that seemed ordinary, manageable, even predictable. No one needed to see the late nights, the anxiety, or the meticulous calculations that eventually multiplied my earnings. I was building a life that Caroline could never imagine, and I was doing it on my own terms. By the time I hit my 30th birthday, the empire I had quietly built was substantial. Investments, small businesses, and careful financial strategies had turned that trust fund inheritance into a far larger, untouchable fortune. I had learned not only to manage money, but to command it with the same fierce precision I had once reserved for defending myself against Caroline's condescending remarks. Even so, my life was more than numbers. I decorated my office with pieces that reminded me of the journey, a painting of a stormy sea, representing struggle, a photograph of my grandmother smiling, her locket glinting in the light, and a carefully curated bookshelf, each title chosen to challenge my mind and expand my horizons. It wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about honoring the promise I had made to myself that day, stepping out of shadows, and owning every part of my life unapologetically. And through it all, I kept Caroline in the periphery, a reminder of why I had started. She didn't need to know the scale of my success yet. One day, she would see it. One day, she would understand that the girl she tried to belittle was untouchable, unstoppable, and entirely her own person. I didn't rush to tell Caroline or anyone else in my family about what I had built. I had learned long ago that true power is quiet until it needs to speak. So, when I received the official notice that she had filed for custody of my trust fund, I felt something that was equal parts amusement and righteous anticipation. It was finally time for the world I had quietly crafted to intersect with the family who had once tried to diminish me. The morning of the meeting, I arrived at my office, a penthouse suite overlooking the city skyline. The walls were lined with modern art I had purchased from galleries that seemed worlds away from my childhood neighborhood. The polished oak floors reflected the sunlight, and the scent of fresh orchids filled the air. Every detail, from the minimalist desk to the custom leather chairs, whispered a story of deliberate success. I had created a space that reflected not just wealth, but the life I had fought to claim. Caroline walked in first, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, a forced confidence plastered on her face. She expected hesitation, insecurity, perhaps even panic. Instead, she found me leaning casually against the edge of my desk, locket glinting faintly in the sunlight, a cup of coffee in hand, my expression calm and assured. I let her take in the room, the view, the art, the quiet authority I radiated. Her eyes widened slightly, scanning my office like she was trying to decode a puzzle she couldn't solve. Then I finally spoke. "So, you want custody of my trust fund?" My voice was smooth, controlled, and unflinching. "Do you know how that works?" She swallowed hard, attempting a confident smile. I just think. I raised a hand. "Stop. I built this. Every single dollar. Every investment, every business, every late night when no one else cared. You had no part in it. And yet, here you are, asking a judge to hand it to you, as if your birthright entitles you to my hard work." Her face turned pale. For the first time in our lives, she had no words. The judge, a seasoned woman with a reputation for seeing through entitlement and pretense, finally spoke. She glanced at Caroline, then at me, and said with quiet amusement, "Miss Caroline, do you understand what you're asking for?" Caroline hesitated, her voice faltering. I just thought. The judge's lips curved into a subtle smile. You are asking for custody of assets that your sister earned through her skill, determination, and foresight. This is not something you can claim as a right. This is something that is earned, and clearly, your sister has earned far more than you have imagined. The laughter that followed, soft, incredulous, yet perfectly justified, was directed at Caroline. My sister's face crumpled with disbelief, embarrassment, and shame. I leaned back slightly, sipping my coffee, letting the moment settle like a warm, victorious tide over the courtroom. The truth was undeniable. I was untouchable, and she had just learned the hard way. As we left the courtroom later, Caroline avoided my eyes. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the weight of her realization. For the first time, I felt a flicker of satisfaction that wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, recognition, and finally, being seen as the woman I had always been meant to be. With Caroline stunned and the courtroom drama behind me, I realized that my victory didn't have to stop at proving a point. Power was not just about wealth, it was about choices, influence, and the ability to shape outcomes without compromise. I had the upper hand now, and I would use it wisely. I called a family meeting a week later. Not in some cold, intimidating office, but in my penthouse, surrounded by the life I had painstakingly built. The table was set simply, with fresh fruit, flowers, and sunlight streaming in through the large windows. It was a place that spoke of sophistication, but also warmth, a reflection of the woman I had become. Caroline arrived first, hesitant, her hands twisting nervously. The rest of the family trickled in, some curious, others wary. I greeted them warmly, but the underlying authority in my tone was unmistakable. I want to help, I began, but on terms that matter. Not just for me, but for all of us. I outlined conditions, carefully thought out. Caroline, for instance, would have access to mentorship programs and financial literacy courses before she could even discuss involvement in family assets again. She needed to demonstrate responsibility, maturity, and commitment, not entitlement. I made it clear, no shortcuts, no manipulation, no assumptions. Other family members, those who had criticized or dismissed me over the years, had their own paths to take. Therapy, personal development, and contributions to causes they were passionate about became prerequisites for collaboration with me. I wanted them to grow, not just for my sake, but for their own. Throughout it all, I balanced firmness with compassion. I care about you all, I said, but caring doesn't mean enabling bad habits. Growth takes accountability. My eyes met Caroline's, and I could see the flicker of comprehension, the first spark of realization that success and respect are earned, not inherited. The atmosphere shifted subtly. It was no longer about fear, resentment, or rivalry. It was about possibility, about rewriting our dynamics and breaking patterns that had long held us hostage. I wasn't just reclaiming power, I was modeling a new way forward, a way that combined independence, authority, and grace. By the end of the meeting, the tension had eased into something productive. There was hope, yes, but also a clear understanding that the old rules no longer applied. I had the power, yes, but more importantly, I had set the stage for change, real, meaningful, lasting change that would benefit everyone willing to rise to the challenge. For the first time, I realized that my triumph wasn't just in the courtroom or the balance sheets. It was in the conditions I set, the boundaries I enforced, and the vision I offered. A life where respect, growth, and integrity mattered more than inheritance or entitlement. Months passed, and change began to take root. Caroline enrolled in the financial literacy program I had insisted on, her stubborn pride slowly yielding to curiosity and humility. She still struggled, of course, fumbling through numbers and second-guessing her decisions, but there was a spark of growth I had never seen before. Other family members started to honor their commitments as well. Cousins who had mocked my ambition joined local volunteer boards. Uncle Richard finally sought counseling for years of avoidance and toxic habits. Each small step was a ripple, proof that the conditions I set were not about punishment, they were about transformation. I watched them from my office one quiet evening, sunlight fading into the warm glow of the city below. My locket rested against my chest, still cold and comforting, a reminder of the day Grandma had told me, "Your strength is yours. Protect it, nurture it, and it will guide you." I smiled softly, feeling the weight of the journey and the full circle it had created. I thought back to the scared, trembling girl I had been, the one dismissed by Caroline, ignored by family, underestimated by everyone who failed to see her potential. That girl had walked into uncertainty with nothing but determination and a small silver locket. Today, she was unrecognizable even to herself, standing in a penthouse that symbolized resilience, intellect, and independence. And yet, the greatest triumph wasn't the money, the courtroom victory, or even the respect earned. It was the woman I had become. Capable, compassionate, and fiercely unyielding. I had learned to love myself enough to set boundaries, demand growth, and celebrate success on my own terms. As the evening settled over the city, I whispered softly, almost to the past version of myself, "You did it. You are enough. You are everything." The locket warmed against my heart, a tangible reminder that the strength had always been mine, waiting to be claimed. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I realized something essential. Independence isn't just about what you build. It's about the grace with which you carry it, the courage with which you protect it, and the wisdom to know that true power comes not from dominating others, but from standing firmly, unapologetically, as yourself. I had earned every penny, every lesson, every victory, and, most importantly, I had earned the right to be exactly who I was meant to be. Bottom of form.